The Lord bless you, and thank you for looking in. The Lord bless the both of us, all of us, in these moments of reflection. Help me, won't you? I go here and there, but you pay good attention, and let's all be profited by the good things that we'll be thinking here. Yes? Last time we were together, we were talking about the glorification of the Son of Man. We're going to continue that. The text we've been looking at is John chapter 12, 20 and following. Yes. The Greeks are coming. Jesus sees them coming and is provoked into saying, "The hour has come that the Son of Man should be glorified." And then we skipped a verse or two, which we'll go back on. Then he says, "Now my soul's troubled. Should I ask to be exempted from this?" And no, I can't do that. Don't want to do it. For this purpose, I came into the world. And we then spent a few moments saying that we can't sever the cross about which he momentarily is speaking. We can't sever the cross from the resurrection, the glorification, the ascension, and all of that of our Lord Jesus Christ. It's all a single package, but it begins in context with these remarks. It begins with the cross experience, and the verses that we're skipping in verse 24 to 26 makes that point. He's talking about the cross, going into the ground, delivering itself, life delivering itself into the ground that fruit might be born. Moving on, we said then, Christ calling himself the Son of Man. We went to Daniel chapter 7, and I am hoping that you looked at that. We talked about the four Gentile kingdoms that arose as a result of the clash of the nations, and God using and working in and through the clash of the nations. These are four earthly kingdoms. They arise out of the earth, the text goes on to say. And then in 7:13, there's another image. There's the image of a son of man, one human looking. He's not bestial. He's not savage, unbridled anything. No, this is a son of man. And he goes to the Ancient of Days, and he gets this kingdom, no end of the dominion, and he reigns forever. And when the interpretation comes, the Son of Man gives the dominion to, the dominion is given to the people of God, which immediately identifies the Son of Man with the people of God. Yes. N.T. Wright would say that the Son of Man here doesn't represent Jesus. I think he's wrong. He could be right, but I think he's wrong. I'm not interested in developing any point about that, other than to affirm one more time. The Son of Man here is the Messiah, and the Messiah is fully identified with his people, for he gets the dominion, and in his getting the dominion, the people of God get the dominion. That identification, close identification, that speaking of the Messiah, and at the same time, by speaking of the Messiah, you're speaking of the people of God. There's nothing strange about that. Paul speaks of it in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 12. And then in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, he says to the believers there at Corinth, you are parts of Christ. People are baptized into Christ. Romans 6, Galatians chapter 3, 26 and 7, and on, yes? So, the Son of Man is the Messiah, the King, not only of Old Testament Israel, but the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Twice in Revelation, John's book, Revelation, Jesus in chapters 17 and 19 is called the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And in chapter 1 of Revelation, he's the ruler of the kings of the earth. Christ isn't just Old Testament or New, not talking simply and solely about the Jewish Old Testament elect, but now we're talking about the Son of Man who is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And Peter will say to Cornelius in Acts 10 that he has become Lord of all. Okay? Now, that's true about his kingship. But the Son of Man is also an expression used repeatedly in the sense of a human. A human. Psalm 8, David, picture him. He's lying on his back. The sheep are all happy enough. He's looking up at the sky. And it absolutely mesmerizes him. Psalm 8. And he says, when I consider all of that, I wonder, and here he says, what is man? What is humanity? Or a son of man, an individual of the human family. What is man that you are mindful of him? That you bother thinking about him and care for him? Or a son of man that you visit him, not there judge him, and not in that text, but do him good, pay attention to his needs, all of that. The Son of Man speaks of a human. Over 90 times, as I recall, in the book of Ezekiel, God calls Ezekiel, Son of Man, do this, do that, go here, go there. Son of Man, pay attention. Over 90 times. Son of Man there, not talking about the Messiah. He's a human. Someone who is not God. But someone who's not an angel either. Son of Man, and in this area that we're now discussing, not the Messiah, a human. Jesus always saw himself as the Messiah. Well, he was a little baby and grew in wisdom and stature, but he knew he was the Messiah. And in my view, Daniel 7, and lots of people who take that view, Son of Man in Daniel 7 is the Messiah. And Jews will use such speech of the Messiah. But the scriptures will also speak of the Son of Man as a human. And Jesus will say, he's a man. I'm a man who speaks the truth to you, he says. Peter says, here he is, Jesus of Nazareth, a man approved by God. On and on. Guys on the road to Emmaus call him a man. He's a man. He's human. I'm saying, check it out. I'm saying that in John chapter 12, when Jesus speaks of himself as the Son of Man, he's not just talking about himself as the Messiah, though I believe he is doing that. But he's doing more than that. He's speaking of the glorification, his own particular glorification, me as a human. I'm to be glorified. I am to die and then be glorified. What is happening here? We're talking creation and recreation. God, in the Genesis text, chapter 2, imagine, down on his knees, he's working with the clay and he's shaping Adam. That's what the narrative tells us. He's down there, he's doing that. And then he breathes into the man's nostrils. And he breathes the spirit of life. And man becomes a living soul. Here's the beginning of the creation story. As the narrative tells us, God takes the earth, makes the man, very earthy, all of that, subject to death, of course. But here he is, lifeless, and God breathes into him, and man comes alive. Man becomes a living soul. Older versions, man becomes a living being. More modern versions. But get this, it's creation, and that which was dead coming alive. Humanity begins with God making the dead man, not yet man, but the dead man alive. And then the sin and doing what he shouldn't have done. And the day that you eat of that forbidden tree, you'll die. Death then, not on that day, and that's not the point of the text, but that's another discussion. On that day, when he rebelled against God, he and his wife, death entered the world. But instead of obliterating the human family, God purposes to bring the human family to what he always had purposed, to bring humans to a glorious state. We sinned, that interrupted what would have developed. This is almost silly. Had we not sinned, that life would have gone on, and however that was all worked out, we would have ended up fully glorified. But we fell from, in sinning, we fell from the glory that God purposed us to have. In Jesus Christ, in Jesus Christ, the Son of Man. In this passage, he himself alone, and this passage, is to be glorified. Good for him. We're happy for him. Now, when he says the Son of Man is to be glorified, he is talking particularly about himself, but he's talking about himself in identification with all who are embraced in him. As in Daniel chapter 7, he gets the dominion, and he, in getting it, his people get it. He suffers, his people suffer with him. He is glorified. His people are glorified in and with him. This is all over the scriptures, New Testament in particular. In Romans 8, yes, Romans 8:17, he talks about us being heirs with him. Sons of God, of course. Heirs with him. And being heirs with him, Paul says, 8:17 and following, we will reign with him. There's a dominion notion, you see. We will reign with him if we suffer with him. We reign with him. And that whole section beginning at 8:17 all the way to 39 is talking about his people, those belonging to him, embracing his image. What does that mean? As the Messiah suffers and comes to glory, so his people, in likeness, in his image, they suffer and they come to glory. In 8:29 of Romans, all these texts you need to look at for yourself, yes? In 8:28, after he's talked about suffering, he says in 8:18, all the suffering, he said, I don't think it's worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed. And then he talks about the glorification of the creation, groaning, looking for, it personifies the creation, looking for the coming of the children of God, and the creation loves it. And those who belong to God in and through Christ, they are waiting also for the full redemption. But they're going through suffering all the while. And then he says in 8:28, for all things work together for good to those that love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. And then he says this, for whom, 8:29, for whom he did foreknow. The people he saw in his mind's eye and purposed and all of that to work with and bring about. For whom he did foreknow, them he did, or is it those? Them he did foreordain to be, listen, conformed to the image of his Son. Now we think, this is what we do with texts. We think that means each individual. We are to become nicer, finer, deeper, richer, more righteous people. I don't doubt the truth of that. It's part of the package. It comes with that. But that's not what Paul has in mind. Paul makes the point here in that whole section. Christ didn't get to glory without suffering. You're his people. You're part of him. You won't either. God has it arranged that you will be, has foreordained that you will be in the image of his Son. As he suffered and went to glory, the people will suffer and come to their glory. And that is why you share all of the things that hurt you. Cancer, bereavement, all of that. It's a part of being human during this phase of human history. He who came into the world, Jesus Christ, God being, choosing to be, and continuing to choose to be, Jesus Christ, come into the world to share the suffering of the world, that he might bring humans to glory. And he rehearses that purpose of his that he carried out in his own earthly experience. The people of God rehearse that. Jesus rehearses his redeeming work in and through you who belong to him. Listen to me. You don't just suffer, as all the rest of this sad, suffering world. You suffer for this world, as your Lord and Master has done. And it isn't just persecution. It's what the world gets. Loneliness, heartache, disease, humiliation, as the Christ did. All of that. Don't believe anyone who tells you, you who have embraced the Lord Jesus Christ, don't let anyone tell you that all of your suffering, whatever it is, disease or whatever, don't let them tell you, well, that's got nothing to do with suffering for the world. Don't believe that. I don't know what you're hurting from. I don't know if you're dying this minute. I don't know if the doctor just told you recently, a couple of months, and that's it. I don't know if you've sat and watched your loved ones dying and it's absolutely tearing up your heart. I don't know if that's true. I wouldn't doubt for a minute there are people listening to this that are doing all of that. I'm saying that God would want you to know that all of that, since you've come to Christ and said, you, I want, relationship with you, I want, all your suffering is transformed and becomes glorious. 1 Peter 4. Wish I knew the verse without having to turn, but this is too good to miss. 1 Peter, well, I said 4, didn't I? You can't trust me. You have to watch me. 1 Peter chapter, let's see. 1 Peter 4. I'm amazed. 1 Peter 4:12. Beloved, don't think it strange concerning the fiery trial, which is to try you as though some strange thing was happening to you. Listen, listen, listen. But rejoice to the extent that you partake of Christ's suffering. And when his glory is revealed, you may also be glad with exceeding joy. If you are reproached for the name of Christ, blessed are you, for the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. On their part, he is blasphemed, but on your part, he's glorified. Ah, yes, but there's persecution involved there. That's true. That's true. But there's no persecution in Matthew 8, 16 and 17, which we don't have the time to look at. It's a long discussion, but it's long and rich and worth it. Can you believe what might happen to this life of suffering that you're going through? If God walked in and said to you this moment, my dear sir, what you're doing now is for the world. It's service to me. You are not only glorifying yourself because you continue to trust in me, you're glorifying me. Yeah. Matthew 8, 16 and 17. They come to him from all over the place. Sick, lame, blind, deaf, demon tormented. All of these things, not persecution, suffering of all kinds. And he heals them all. And Matthew says, this all happened. He healed all these people that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. He carried this is Isaiah 53, no less. He carried our diseases, and he made a burden of our sicknesses. Did Christ bear the sickness of humans? What does that mean? Was all their illness transferred onto them the day he was healing them? No, it's got nothing to do with transference. He enters in and he looks at them and sees them in awful need, and he helps them. He takes their sickness on his heart. He takes their woundedness. He takes their loneliness. He takes all these things on his heart. He come into the world to share all of that. Why? Because he wanted us to know that God had not abandoned us. All kinds of bad things have happened since the day we abandoned God. We started hurting one another. We got diseased. All kinds of things happened since the day we abandoned God. Jesus, who is God being Jesus, comes into the world, shares our trouble to tell us, well, you may have abandoned me. I never will abandon you. Not ever. And in that, not only is God glorifying himself in our eyes, he's glorifying Jesus the man. And in glorifying Jesus the man, he's telling humanity, all who are embraced in his saving work. And there's more to be said about that than that. in him being resurrected, having glorified his Father and glorified himself in glorifying his Father, and the Father exalts the Son of Man, he's exalting humans. Do you know what's ahead for you? You know what's ahead for you? Glory. Glory. You're in pain right now? Agonizing over one thing or another? Glory is ahead for you. Trust him. Trust him. Believe what he tells you. He's earned our right to trust. He came in and as Jesus Christ to share the trouble. Believe that. Please come back if you're able, will you? Bring a friend, would you? God bless you.